It was 9:02 on a Tuesday morning, and the small black boy in the second-hand blazer raised his hand.
Excuse me, sir. I think there's been a mistake. This isn't the same exam the others have.
Harold Whitaker turned slowly. He looked the 10-year-old up and down, like something stuck to his shoe.
Oh, sweetie. A little black kid from the projects correcting me? Adorable.
He raised his voice across the exam room.
Look at him, Sandra. Bus driver mom. Public housing, second-hand suit. Black kids like him don't belong in rooms like this. They don't get scholarships. They get pity. Sit down before you embarrass your mother.
He patted the child's head twice like a stray dog.
Just do your best, kiddo. Try not to cry.
The other 4 children covered their mouths. Sandra looked away. A black 10-year-old sat alone, humiliated, and no one spoke up. But none of them imagined what that quiet little boy was about to do in the next 15 minutes. To understand what happened next, you need to understand the room. And to understand the room, you need to understand the boy. His name was Wesley Caldwell, 10 years old, 5th grader. The youngest of 5 finalists at the Ashford Young Scholars Program, the most prestigious math scholarship in New England. The winner got a one-on-one mentorship with an MIT professor for 8 years, a $200,000 education fund, and their name engraved on a brass plaque in the marble lobby of Northbridge Preparatory Academy. In 28 years of the prize, no black child had ever won. Wesley had walked in that morning holding his mother's hand. His mother, Vivian, drove a city bus on the night shift. She had traded her Tuesday rotation with a coworker just to be there. She wore a navy coat over her uniform, with the badge still clipped to her collar because she hadn't had time to take it off. In her tote bag was a small plastic container of cornbread she had baked at 4 in the morning. "For after," she had said. "When you're hungry." She kissed the top of his head at the auditorium door and told him one thing, and only one thing. "I'm proud of you." Before you walk in there, after you walk out. Nothing changes that. Then she let him go. The auditorium had 2 parts. There was the small exam room where the 5 children sat at 5 small desks, supervised by Whitaker and the vice principal, Sandra. And there was the big public hall outside it, where 300 people were gathered for the live final. Parents, faculty, 5 MIT observers, the Boston Globe education reporter in the back row with his notebook open, Mrs. Eleanor Hollings, the chair of the Ashford Foundation Board, donors in tuxedos at 9 in the morning. The exam was supposed to be projected onto a giant screen in the public hall, live, page by page, so the audience could watch each child's work in real time. That was the rule. Total transparency. The live stream would begin the moment the first pencil touched the first page. After the 90-minute written exam, the panel would announce the winner from the stage, but the live stream had not started yet. There was a 5-minute window between when Whitaker handed out the envelopes and when the cameras went live. 5 minutes nobody outside the exam room could see. Whitaker had used those 5 minutes carefully. You should also know about Whitaker, 62 years old, head of the math department, co-author of a famous 1998 paper on tensor analysis with Professor Lang of Yale, cited 1,200 times, respected, tenured, generous with recommendation letters, but only for certain students. 6 months earlier, after Wesley had scored a perfect 100 on a midterm, Whitaker had marched him to the principal's office and demanded a supervised retest, claiming the work was too clean for a black kid from Roxbury. Wesley took the retest, alone in a glass room, with 3 teachers watching. He scored another perfect 100. Whitaker did not apologize. He smiled and said, "Well, glad we cleared that up." He never wrote Wesley a letter of recommendation. His calendar was full. That same week, he wrote 3 letters for white students in the same class. Wesley had qualified for the Ashford finals on objective test scores alone. No letter required. Whitaker could not keep him out. So Whitaker chose a different path. 2 nights earlier, at 11:34 at night, in the empty teacher's prep room, Whitaker had told Sandra exactly what he planned to do. He thought no one was listening. The school's old security audio system had been recording continuously for 2 years. Nobody remembered it was on. Nobody, that is, except one very quiet janitor who had heard things in that prep room she didn't like, and who had decided, that morning at 7:48, to anonymously email the Foundation a single audio file. But that file was sitting in Mrs. Hollings's inbox, unopened. She didn't know about it yet. Nobody did. Wesley sat at his desk and looked down at the cream-colored envelope Whitaker had just dropped in front of him. Around him, the other 4 children opened their maroon envelopes and began to read. He could see their first pages. Quadratic equations, a simple geometry problem, standard 5th grade genius-level material. He opened his envelope. His face did not change. The exam in his hands was Calculus 1. Final exam, college sophomore level. He had seen this format before. He knew exactly where it came from. And he understood, in that moment, that the man at the front of the room had not made a mistake. So what does a 10-year-old boy do when he realizes the most powerful adult in the room has just tried to destroy his future on purpose? Wesley sat very still. He looked at the pages in his hands. He looked at the pages on Charlotte Brooks' desk to his left. Charlotte was 11. She was on problem 1, a polynomial. Theodore Hayes, 10, on his right, was on problem 1, the same polynomial. The other 2 children had the same exam too. 5 maroon envelopes, 4 matching exams, 1 cream-colored envelope with something else entirely. Wesley's pages had 5 problems: limits, derivatives, integration by parts, a continuity proof, a convergence question. The header at the top of the first page had been carefully blacked out with a marker, but the formatting was unmistakable. He had seen this exact font, this exact spacing, in a binder of old MIT exams that had been left in a corner of the public library on Dudley Street. He had read it when he was 9. He had solved 3 of those problems on scratch paper while waiting for his mother to finish her late shift. He understood 3 things in 3 seconds. First, this was a college calculus exam. Second, if he simply raised his hand right now and said, "Sir, my exam is wrong," he would lose. Whitaker would shrug and say, "It looks correct to me, sweetheart. Maybe the problems are just over your head." The panel outside would hear that the boy had asked to switch his exam mid-test. The headline tomorrow would write itself. 10-year-old finalist demands easier test, withdraws. He would be the kid who couldn't take the heat. The scholarship would go to someone else. Whitaker would walk away clean. Third, the live stream had not started yet. The world outside the exam room could not see what had just happened. But it would in 4 minutes, when the cameras went live. Every page he wrote would be projected onto a giant screen in front of 300 people, including the Boston Globe, including the MIT observers, including his mother in the 3rd row. He had 2 choices: walk out or pick up the pencil. He picked up the pencil. He smiled, a small private smile almost to himself. Whitaker, watching from across the room, mistook that smile for nervousness. He turned to Sandra and whispered something and laughed under his breath. But the smile wasn't fear. It was recognition. Wesley had seen this exam before, sort of. He knew what was inside, and he had just realized something Whitaker did not know. 2 nights ago, sitting at his kitchen table at 10 o'clock, Wesley had reread an old photocopied paper he had carried around since he was 8. A paper he had found in the same library, abandoned in a return bin. The paper was titled Tensor Decomposition in Hilbert Space Operators by H. Whittaker and R. Lang, 1998. He had read it dozens of times. He didn't understand all of it, but he understood the elementary lemma in Chapter 2 completely. He had memorized it the way other kids memorize song lyrics. He didn't know yet that the fifth problem on his exam, the convergence question, required exactly that lemma to solve cleanly. Whittaker had built the trap from his own materials. He was about to walk into it. The clock on the wall said 9:03. The big screen in the public hall flickered on. The camera above his desk lit up. A red dot appeared. The live stream had started. 300 people in the next room leaned forward in their chairs. Vivian, in the third row, gripped the strap of her tote bag so tightly her knuckles went white. Wesley did not write anything for the first 90 seconds. He read. And then he read again. What does it look like to the watching world when a quiet child stares at a blank page and refuses to move? In the public hall, the audience had no idea what kind of exam was on Wesley's screen. They could only see the page itself, projected 15 feet wide above the stage. Most of them couldn't read calculus on sight. They could see math symbols, integral signs, the curl of a derivative. They saw a child not writing anything. Some of them began to whisper. He's frozen. The poor thing is frozen. A woman in the fifth row, one of Charlotte Brooks's aunts, turned to her sister and said, loud enough to carry, I told you, affirmative action picks. They get them in the door, and then they crack. Vivian heard it. She did not turn around. She did not breathe. But Wesley wasn't frozen. He was reading the whole exam first, all 5 problems, before writing a single mark. Most kids, even smart kids, start writing immediately. Wesley read. That was the first thing. He had been doing it since he was 7. Within 60 seconds, he saw something nobody else had seen. Not the proctor, not the panel, not Whittaker himself. Problem 2 had a typo. The problem read, let f of x be continuous on the closed interval from 0 to 1, and let the derivative of f at every point equal 1 over x. But 1 over x is undefined at x equals 0. You cannot have a function whose derivative equals 1 over x on a closed interval that includes 0. The two conditions contradict each other. It was the kind of mistake a senior calculus student might catch. A panicked freshman would not. A panicked 10-year-old definitely would not. Wesley caught it. And he made a decision. He decided the order. Problem 3 first, because it was the cleanest. Then problem 1. Then problem 4. Then problem 2, which he would solve in both possible interpretations to prove the typo. Then problem 5, the convergence proof, which he would save for last. He picked up the pencil and began. Round, careful handwriting. Numbers neat, symbols precise. The kind of handwriting a child uses when he has been told, his entire short life, that his work has to be twice as clean to be considered half as good. By minute 4, he was halfway through problem 3. In the 4th row of the public hall, a math professor named Holloway leaned over to her colleague and whispered, "Is that a Riemann sum?" The colleague, an MIT observer, did not answer. She was staring at the screen. Her mouth was slightly open. By minute 5, problem 3 was done. Wesley flipped the page and started problem 1. In the public hall, the murmuring stopped. The audience didn't know calculus, but they could see something. They could see a screen filling with mathematics at a speed that did not look 10 years old. By minute 6, Wesley raised his hand. The room froze. In the small exam room, Whittaker exhaled with theatrical patience and walked over. "Yes, kiddo?" Need to use the bathroom? Wesley spoke quietly, politely. Sir, problem 2 has a typo. The function can't be continuous on the closed interval from 0 to 1 and have a derivative equal to 1 over x, because 1 over x isn't defined at x equals 0. I think it should be the half-open interval from 0 to 1. I can solve both versions. Which one would you like? For a fraction of a second, Whitaker's face did something it had not done in 20 years. It went blank. Then he recovered. If you can't solve a problem, just write cannot solve, sweetheart. Don't make excuses. I can solve it, sir. I'm just asking which version you'd like. In the public hall, the live stream microphones picked up every word. Every single word. The audience heard the boy. They heard the teacher. They heard the dismissal in the teacher's voice. And they heard something else. The sound of 300 people, in unison, processing the same idea at the same time. That child just spotted something the head of the math department missed. Or didn't miss. Mrs. Hollings, the foundation chair, looked down at her copy of the exam packet that had been emailed to the panel that morning. She read problem 2. Her eyebrows lifted. She made a small mark in her notebook and said nothing. Dr. Margaret Ashford, the chair of the panel, did the same thing. But her pen stopped after the mark. She did not move it again for a long time. Wesley waited. Whitaker said nothing. Wesley waited some more. Finally, Whitaker said, with a tight smile, "Just answer what's on the page." And he walked away. Wesley sat down. He picked up his pencil, and he answered both versions of problem 2 on the same page, side by side, with a small handwritten note in the margin. Problem as written contains a contradiction at x equals 0. Solving both intended cases. In the public hall, the Boston Globe reporter wrote the words both intended cases in his notebook and circled them 3 times. By minute 8, Wesley was on problem 4. By minute 10, he was finished with problem 4. The screen showed clean, complete proofs, written by a child whose handwriting was still slightly uneven from learning cursive. In the 3rd row, Vivian Caldwell did not understand what was on the screen, but she understood her son's voice on the loudspeaker. She understood the words, "I can solve it, sir." She had been holding her breath for 10 minutes. For the first time, she let it out. The woman from the 5th row, the one who had said affirmative action pics, did not say another word for the rest of the morning. But here is the strange part. Whitaker still did not look worried. He looked, if anything, slightly amused. Why? What did he know that nobody else in that room knew yet? Whitaker knew about problem 5. Problem 5 was the trap inside the trap. Even if a child somehow solved the first 4 college-level problems, problem 5 required a specific lemma, a small technical result that was not stated anywhere in the exam packet. The only way to know it was to have read a particular paper from 1998, a paper most calculus students never encountered, a paper Whitaker himself had co-authored. He was certain Wesley could not have read it. He was certain nobody under the age of 20 had. He was wrong. But he didn't know that yet. So he stood at the back of the small exam room with his arms crossed and waited for Wesley to hit the wall. Wesley flipped to problem 5 at minute 11. Out in the public hall, things were beginning to change. The audience was awake now. Phones, which had been quietly checking emails, were now filming the giant screen. Math professors who had drifted in from neighboring departments to grab coffee in the back hallway had stopped to watch. The rear doors of the auditorium opened. 2 more reporters slipped in. In the 3rd row, Vivian's hands were trembling. 3 escalations happened in those next 4 minutes. The first was speed. By minute 11, Wesley had completed 4 college-level problems in 8 minutes of writing. That was 2 minutes per problem. A trained calculus student would take 10 minutes minimum per problem. The audience didn't need to understand math to understand a clock. The second was procedure. Whitaker walked down the aisle of the small exam room and stopped at Wesley's desk. From this point on, I want you to show every algebraic step. No skipping, no shortcuts. If I don't see the work, I don't count the answer. It was a demand he had not made of any other child. The other four were still on problem 1 of their packet, doing arithmetic. Wesley nodded once. He didn't argue. He didn't say a word. He simply began annotating his proof in even tighter, smaller handwriting, with sub-steps and references in the margin. The screen above the stage filled with not just the proof, but the proof of the proof. Whitaker had just made the demonstration twice as impressive. Sandra, beside him, looked like she wanted to be anywhere else on Earth. The third escalation was public. Dr. Ashford, on the panel, slid her copy of the exam packet to Mrs. Hollings. Mrs. Hollings read the cover sheet. She read the first problem. Her hand went to her mouth. An MIT observer in the second row took out his phone, but not to text. He was filming. Another observer leaned to a colleague and whispered, "That's the 18.100B review packet. From 2003. Where did this come from?" The Boston Globe reporter quietly stood up and moved 3 rows closer to the stage. "Now I want to pause here. Right at this moment. Okay, real talk for a second. Let me say what we're all watching. A 10-year-old black kid in a second-hand blazer just spotted a typo on a college exam, called it out in front of a room full of professors, and is now solving doctoral-level math live on a giant screen. And the man who tried to break him is standing in the back, arms folded, sweating through his collar. If this kid gets through problem 5, you tell me how this story ends. Because I already know. And I bet you do too. By minute 12, Wesley had begun problem 5. The convergence question. The one that required the lemma from the 1998 paper. He did not pause. He did not hesitate. He wrote the lemma into the body of his proof as if he had known it his whole life, which almost he had. And in the margin, in tiny letters that the camera barely caught, he wrote a citation. Per Whitaker and Lang, 1998. The audience could not see the citation clearly. The screen was too far away, and the letters were too small. But Dr. Ashford, who had a copy of his work projected onto her own panel monitor at the table, saw it instantly. She looked up sharply at Whitaker. Whitaker, at the back of the room, did not see her look. He was watching Wesley write. His face had gone very pale, not because Wesley was solving the problem, because Wesley was solving it using his own paper. The trap was not just failing. The trap was being turned around in real time, in front of the audience, by a 10-year-old child who had done his homework. By minute 14, the proof was complete. By minute 15, Wesley capped his pencil. He set it down on the desk. He folded his hands in his lap. The wall clock read 9:18. 15 minutes. Now what does a man do when the boy he tried to destroy has just used the man's own life's work to destroy him? And what does that boy do next? Before we find out, I want you to understand how Wesley got here. Because this didn't start 15 minutes ago. It started 10 years ago. When Wesley was 4, Vivian was sitting at a bus stop with him on her lap. She had just gotten off a double shift. She was trying not to fall asleep. Wesley pointed at the digital sign that said the next bus was 11 minutes away. And he said, "Mommy, 11 minus 1 is 10. 10 minus 1 is 9. 9 minus 1 is 8. She thought he had learned it from Sesame Street. He kept counting. He counted all the way down to 0, then he kept going into negative numbers, which Sesame Street does not teach. She didn't say anything. She just held him a little tighter on the bus ride home. When Wesley was 5, his preschool teacher called. "Miss Caldwell, your son added 2-digit numbers in his head today. Did somebody at home teach him?" Vivian, who worked nights and slept days and barely had time to braid her own hair, said honestly, "No, ma'am. He must have figured it out himself." When Wesley was 6, his first-grade teacher caught him reading a third-grade math textbook during recess. She took it from him and told him not to bring it to school again. "It will make the other children feel bad," she said. Vivian listened to that meeting with her hands folded in her lap. She nodded. She thanked the teacher. That same evening, on her way home from her shift, she got off the bus 2 stops early and registered Wesley for a public library card at the branch on Dudley Street. They had a children's math section. They also had an unlocked shelf of donated college textbooks that nobody monitored. Wesley, age 6, found that shelf within a month. When Wesley was 7, he won the library's summer math contest. The prize was a $20 gift card to a used bookstore. He spent it on a battered copy of Algebra for Dummies and a workbook on geometric proofs. He read both in 2 weeks. When Wesley was 8, his public school recommended him for grade acceleration. Northbridge Preparatory Academy, the most elite school in Boston, heard about him through a tutor at the library. They invited him to interview. The headmaster, Bradford, met him for 40 minutes. Wesley solved a problem on the headmaster's whiteboard that the headmaster had not been able to solve himself. Bradford offered him a full scholarship into the 5th grade class on the spot. But the offer had to go through the admissions committee. And on the committee was Harold Whitaker. Whitaker voted no. The official reason on the record was concerns about the candidate's emotional readiness given his age. The unofficial reason, according to one committee member who later told Vivian off the record, was simpler. He didn't think a kid like that should be in a school like this. Bradford, the headmaster, overruled him. Wesley got in. Whitaker did not forget. When Wesley was 8 and a half, he found that abandoned photocopy in the library return bin. Tensor Decomposition in Hilbert Space Operators by H. Whitaker and R. Lang, 1998. He didn't understand most of it, but he understood the elementary lemma in Chapter 2, and he kept the photocopy in the top drawer of his desk at home for 2 years, taking it out and rereading it whenever he was bored. When Wesley was 9, Whitaker, now teaching him directly in advanced math, gave him a specialized midterm supposedly suited to his level. It was a middle school exam. Wesley finished it in 4 minutes with a perfect score. Whitaker did not write excellent on the top. He just wrote pass and slid it back across the desk without looking up. When Wesley was 9 and a half, Wesley asked Whitaker for a recommendation letter for the Ashford finals. Whitaker said his calendar was full. The next week, he wrote 3 recommendation letters for white students in the same advanced math class. Wesley qualified for the Ashford anyway. The objective entrance exam scored him in the top 3 of all New England applicants. Whitaker could not block him at the door. When Wesley was 10, 1 week before the finals, Vivian's car broke down. She couldn't afford the repair. She picked up a 4th bus shift at the depot to cover it. She came home at 4 in the morning and found Wesley still awake at the kitchen table, surrounded by paper, working through old MIT calculus exams from the library. "Baby, it's 4 o'clock. Go to bed." He looked up. "Mom, I think they're going to try something on Tuesday." She sat down across from him. She did not say, "Don't be silly." She did not say, "You're imagining it." She knew her son. She had watched him watch the world for 10 years, and she had learned to trust what he saw. "What do you want to do about it, baby?" "I want to be ready." She nodded. "Then read your books. I'll make coffee." She made coffee at 4 a.m. on a Saturday. She watched her son reread Whitaker's 1998 paper at the kitchen table for the 17th time. She did not understand a single equation on the page, but she understood her son. And she understood that the world had given him no margin for error. None. Zero. Not one. She kissed the top of his head and went to bed. Now, back in the auditorium, at minute 15 of the exam, with Wesley's pencil resting on a finished page and Whitaker turning pale at the back of the room, back in that auditorium, Vivian Caldwell sat in the third row and her hands shook so badly she had to set them on her lap to make them stop. She did not understand the math on the screen, but she understood that her son had walked into this room knowing this was coming, and had walked in anyway, and had spent every night of the last week preparing for the exact ambush that had just happened. Tears began to fall down her cheeks. Not loud, not dramatic, just 2 slow lines down her face. The Boston Globe photographer, who had been scanning the audience for a reaction shot, saw her, raised his camera, and took a picture that would, later, run on the front page of the Sunday paper. Above a headline he had not written yet, but already knew he would fight his editor to publish. The picture was titled simply, "A Mother Watching," but the test wasn't over yet. Wesley had finished writing. He had not yet handed the exam in. And in 15 seconds, when he stood up to deliver it, the man who had tried to destroy him was about to do something nobody in that room expected. What was Whitaker going to do next? The clock said 9:18. Total elapsed time since the cream envelope was opened. 15 minutes. Wesley stood up. He walked calmly to the panel table at the front of the small exam room. He placed the completed exam packet in front of Dr. Ashford. He bowed his head slightly, the way his mother had taught him to do with elders, and he turned and walked back to his seat. The room did not understand what had just happened. Whitaker laughed. Too loud, too forced. "Oh, that's it? Already? Then it's wrong, every page. Children panic, they scribble. We've all seen it." He stood up and reached across the panel table to grab the packet. "Let me grade this real quick. Save the panel some time." But Dr. Ashford put her hand flat on the packet first. "I'll grade this one, Harold." Her voice was very quiet, very even. The kind of voice that doesn't need to be loud because the room has already gone silent for it. She opened the packet. She read page 1. She turned it. She read page 2. She turned it. She read every page slowly, while 300 people in the public hall and 5 children in the small exam room watched her face change. When she looked up, she was not looking at Wesley. She was looking at Whitaker. "Harold, this is the 18.100B review packet. From MIT 2003. I was the lead grader that year. There must be some kind of... It's sealed in a Northbridge envelope. The seal is intact, which means it was sealed by you." The murmur in the public hall became an audible buzz. The Boston Globe reporter stood up. The MIT observers looked at each other. One of them quietly moved toward the side aisle. But Whitaker did not collapse. He pivoted. "If the exam was compromised, the result is invalid. We cannot award a $200,000 scholarship based on a contaminated test. The candidate must be reevaluated, orally, in front of the public hall, right now, or his application is forfeit." He said it loud enough for the audience outside to hear. It was a brilliant move in its way. He had taken a disaster and turned it into a public ultimatum. Now the boy could either submit to being grilled in front of 300 people on the spot with no preparation by the man who had just tried to destroy him, or walk away and look like a quitter. Headmaster Bradford stood up to object. Mrs. Hollings's eyes went sharp. But the rules of the foundation allowed it. Whitaker knew that. Dr. Ashford knew it too. She turned to Wesley. "It's your call, Wesley. You can say no. You don't have to do this." The boy looked at her. He looked at his mother in the third row. What does a 10-year-old child say when a 62-year-old professor has just moved the goalposts again in front of the whole world? A 20-minute recess was called. Wesley was led into a small private study room next to the auditorium. Vivian was allowed in. So was Headmaster Bradford. Whitaker, by foundation rule, was not. But he stood in the hallway outside, talking quietly to two donors in tuxedos, gesturing with his hands, smiling. Inside the study room, the boy sat down in a chair that was too big for him. His feet did not reach the floor. The crisis was not the math. The crisis was the framing. If Wesley said no to the oral retest, the headline tomorrow would be, "Black finalist refuses retest, withdraws from scholarship." The truth would die in a footnote. He would become the boy who couldn't take pressure. The scholarship would go to someone else. Whitaker would keep his job. The system would absorb the moment and move on, the way it always had. If he said yes, he was letting Whitaker move the goalposts in real time. He was agreeing to be examined orally, in front of 300 people, on a topic Whitaker would choose, in conditions Whitaker controlled. Vivian did not tell him what to do. She set the cornbread container on the small table. She opened it. She broke off a piece and held it out to him. "Eat, baby. You haven't had anything since 5. He took the piece. He held it without eating it. "Mom, what if I lose?" She looked at him for a long second. "Wesley, I was proud of you before you walked into that room. I will be proud of you after you walk out. Nothing they do in there changes that. You came in here on your own 2 feet. You leave here on your own 2 feet. The rest of it, the panel, the scholarship, that man in the hallway, that's their business, not yours." He bit the cornbread. He didn't say anything. There was a knock on the door. Dr. Ashford stepped in. Bradford gave them a moment and stepped out. She closed the door. She knelt down so she was at the boy's eye level, which not many adults had done for him in his life. "Wesley, you and I both know what just happened out there. The trustees know. The reporter knows. The MIT observers know. But none of them will say it out loud unless you give them a reason they can't ignore. Do you understand?" He nodded. "He's going to ask you something he thinks you can't answer. That's why he made this happen." "I know." When people are scared, Wesley, they reach for the tool they trust the most, the thing they're best at, the thing they wrote their name on. Do you understand what I'm asking? The boy looked up at her. His eyes were dry. He had stopped chewing. "Yes, ma'am." "What is he best at?" "Tensor decomposition. Hilbert Space Operators, 1998. Dr. Ashford did not smile. She just nodded once, like a doctor confirming a diagnosis. She stood up. She walked out. Wesley sat there for one more second. Then he turned to his mother. "Mom, I read his paper when I was 8. I read it again 2 nights ago. He's going to ask me something from his own paper. He doesn't know I've read it." Vivian Caldwell, who drove a city bus for a living and had not slept more than 4 hours a night in a decade, looked at her 10-year-old son. She took his hand. "Then go finish what you came here to do. On your own 2 feet." He stood up. He took her hand. He walked out of the study room with her beside him, not behind him, not in front of him, but next to him. The hallway watched them pass. Whitaker, in the corner with his donors, saw them coming and turned his back deliberately and laughed at something one of the men had said. He did not look at the boy walking past him. He should have. What was he about to ask Wesley in front of 300 people on the biggest stage of his career? And what did he not know? At 9:43, the public hall was fuller than it had been when the exam started. Word had traveled. 2 more reporters had arrived. Faculty from other departments had walked over from neighboring buildings to see what was happening. People were standing in the aisles. Some Northbridge upper school students sat cross-legged on the floor at the foot of the stage. Whitaker walked up to the podium. The microphone clicked on. He had recovered his composure. He was on home ground now. The lectern, the projector, the hall full of adults. This was where men like him won. To resolve any irregularity, he said, his voice smooth and confident, Master Caldwell will solve a single problem of my choosing, on the board, in front of the panel, 20 minutes. We begin now. Wesley walked up to the front. He stopped before stepping onto the stage. He turned to the podium. Sir, I'll do it. But I'd like one condition. You're not in a position. If I solve your problem in the time you give me, you grade my original written exam, live, on screen, page by page, in front of this hall. The audience went very quiet. Whitaker could not refuse. To refuse would look exactly like what it was, a man hiding something. He smiled the way a man smiles when he is swallowing a coin, and he said, Agreed. He turned to the whiteboard. He wrote a problem in large, deliberate letters. It was a tensor decomposition, senior-level math, real, hard, and to anyone who knew the field, unmistakably the central application from a particular 1998 paper. Wesley walked up to the board. He looked at the problem. He did not pick up the marker. He turned around and faced the audience. He spoke quietly. His voice was small, but the hall had gone so silent that everyone heard him. Before I solve this, I'd like to say one thing for the record. This problem isn't random. This is the central application of a paper titled Tensor Decomposition in Hilbert Space Operators, published in 1998. The paper has been cited 1,200 times. The first author, he turned. The hall turned with him. 300 faces pivoted toward the lectern. Is the gentleman standing right there? A sound went through the audience that was not a gasp and not a laugh. It was something in between. The Globe reporter stopped writing because his hand was shaking. A woman in the second row covered her mouth. The MIT observer who had been filming earlier was now standing. Then Wesley turned back to the board. He uncapped the marker. The competence reveal was simple, and the audience could follow it even without understanding the math. He started building the proof from the foundation up, step by step, talking quietly to himself as he wrote, the way kids do when they're working hard. He wrote out the operator. He wrote out the assumptions. He stopped at step 4. He turned to the audience again. Most people would assume the operator is bounded. Mr. Whitaker's paper assumes that. But there's a more general case where it isn't. I'll do both. A murmur. 2 of the MIT observers exchanged a look. He solved the standard case. 5 minutes. The board filled. He moved to the second half of the board. He solved the generalized case. 6 minutes. The second half filled. Both cases on the board now, side by side, in a child's careful handwriting. He capped the marker. The wall clock read 9:55. 12 minutes. The hall was silent. Wesley walked back to the podium. He did not sit. Without being asked, he picked up his original exam packet from the panel table and carried it to the lectern. He placed it on the surface in front of Whitaker. And now, sir, my exam, as agreed. The audience leaned forward. The first golden beat, the subtle flaw. Wesley flipped to page 2 of his exam. Problem 2 had a typo. I caught it at minute 6 and reported it to Mr. Whitaker. He told me to answer what was on the page. I solved both versions. Either version is acceptable. He flipped to page 5. The second golden beat. The public reversal. Problem 5 required a lemma that is not stated in the exam packet. The only way to solve it cleanly is to know the lemma. I cited my source. He held up the page so the camera could see. The camera zoomed. The screen behind the stage showed, in a child's careful handwriting in the margin, the words, "Per Whitaker and Lang, 1998. The audience saw it. The MIT observers saw it. The Boston Globe reporter saw it. Vivian Caldwell, in the third row, saw it. Wesley did not look at Whitaker as he said the next part. He looked gently at the audience. I read your paper when I was 8 years old, sir. I found a copy in the public library on Dudley Street. I didn't understand most of it, but I understood the elementary lemma in Chapter 2. I kept the photocopy in my desk drawer at home. I read it again 2 nights ago. I thought, if anyone in this room would recognize a real proof, it would be you. He stepped back from the lectern. The third golden beat. The reluctant admission. Dr. Ashford stood up slowly from the panel table. She did not speak to Whitaker. She spoke to the room. Mr. Whitaker, as lead examiner, will you confirm, for the official record, into this microphone, that Master Caldwell's solutions to all 5 written problems are correct? The hall held its breath. Whitaker's jaw worked. He looked out at the audience. He looked at the donors he had been laughing with in the hallway 20 minutes ago. He looked at the press camera in the third row, lens up, recording. They are correct. Louder, please. The microphone. Whitaker leaned forward. His mouth was tight. They are correct. All 5. The audience did not cheer. They exhaled. It was a strange, collective sound. 300 people releasing the breath they had been holding for an hour. Vivian Caldwell, in the third row, pressed both hands to her face and bent forward in her seat. The status flip was complete. The man with all the authority in the room had just confirmed, into a live microphone, that the black 10-year-old boy he had publicly humiliated had solved a college calculus exam and a doctoral-level tensor proof in 15 minutes total using the man's own published research. But the story wasn't over, because while Whitaker was speaking those words into the microphone, Mrs. Hollings, the foundation chair, was opening an email on her phone that had been sitting unread in her inbox since 7:48 that morning. What was in that email? As Headmaster Bradford stepped to the podium to begin closing remarks, Mrs. Hollings stood up from the panel table and asked for the floor. She walked to the lectern with a folder. The hall went quiet again. Before we conclude, the Foundation received an anonymous email at 7:48 this morning before the exam began. We did not act on it because we had no grounds. We do now. She held up a single sheet of paper. This is a transcript from the Northbridge Security Audio System. The system has been recording the teacher's prep room continuously for 2 years. It was installed after a petty theft incident. Most of the faculty have forgotten it exists. She put on her glasses. The recording is from the night before last. 11:34 p.m. The voices are Mr. Whitaker and Vice Principal Sandra. I will read 2 lines. She read, quote, "The optics aren't the issue. The issue is the prestige of the prize. We can't have the wrong kid's photo on that brass plaque for the next 40 years. I've prepared a different exam. His mother drives a bus. He'll cry and quit before the 5th minute." End quote. She did not editorialize. She set the page down. The hall finished the rest of the sentence in their heads. What happened next took 90 seconds. The Foundation Board voted on the spot to award the Ashford Scholarship to Wesley Caldwell. They voted on the spot to remove Harold Whitaker from any future foundation involvement. The chair of the Northbridge Board of Trustees, sitting in the audience, requested Whitaker's resignation letter by end of day. Dr. Ashford announced that the scholarship would be renamed. It would now be called the Ashford Caldwell Excellence Award. Whitaker left through a side door before the announcement was finished. Nobody stopped him. Nobody looked at him. The cruelest thing the room did was keep its eyes on the small black boy at the front of the hall, and not give Whitaker even the dignity of a hostile glance on his way out. He walked into the hallway. The two donors he had been laughing with 20 minutes earlier did not turn to greet him. He walked alone. What did Wesley do next? Dr. Ashford invited Wesley up to the podium. He walked up. The blazer was still too big in the shoulders. He had no notes. He still had a piece of cornbread in his hand from the study room. He did not put it down. He stepped up to the microphone. He had to stand on a small box for his face to clear the lectern. I didn't beat anyone today. I just did the math. He looked out at the hall, and he found his mother in the third row. This morning, my mom drove a bus so she could be off work in time to be here. If you want to clap for somebody, please clap for her. She's in the navy coat, third row. She has cornbread in her bag. The hall stood up, all 300 of them. Vivian Caldwell shook her head and tried to wave them down. They clapped anyway, and they turned toward her, and they kept clapping until she finally, slowly, stood up too. One hand pressed to her mouth, the other clutching the strap of her tote bag like it was the only thing holding her to the floor. The Boston Globe photographer took the picture that would run on the front page of the Sunday paper. A mother, standing. Not the boy. The mother, 15 minutes. That was the time. Not because he was a genius, though he was, but because he had been preparing his whole short life for a room that wasn't ready for him. The brass plaque in the Northbridge lobby would say, Caldwell this year. And the next year, and the year after that. The boy did the math. The room did the rest. I'm telling you this story because it stays with me. I keep thinking about that pat on the head, small, almost gentle, and how a whole rigged system can fit inside one tiny gesture. We don't always get the receipts, but sometimes we do, and when we do, the right person is already standing at the board, marker in hand. If you've ever been the kid in that chair, the one nobody bet on, drop a green heart in the comments. If you know that kid, send this video to their mother tonight. And subscribe so the next time someone underestimates the wrong person, you're in the room when it flips. Wesley Caldwell did the math. The room did the rest.
And you think that's where it ends? With the brass plaque, the standing ovation, the resignation letter on the headmaster's desk by 5 p.m.? It's not, because for me, the part of this story I keep coming back to isn't the math, it's the cornbread. That little plastic in container in his mom's tote bag, back at 4 in the morning, carried into a room where people in tuxedo thought she didn't belong. A bus driver, working a night shift, still showing up, still believing. That's the part nobody clapped for first, but that's the part that built him. Talent doesn't bloom in pretty rooms. It grows in kitchen at 4 a.m., in library on the street, in mothers who say, I'm proud of you before you have done a single thing to earn it. I tell you this story because somewhere out there, right now, there is a kid sitting at the kitchen table at midnight, walking through a book they weren't supposed to be reading. And there is a parent who don't understand the math but understand the child. If that's you, keep going. If that's what you, somebody is proud of you tonight. Even if they never said it out loud, you weren't too much. You were just early. If this story moved you, Drop a green heart down below. Send it to mom in your life who never quit on you. And subscribe, because next time someone underestimates the wrong person, I want you in the room when it flips. The boy did the math, you do the rest.